held virtually today. We normally hold our meetings in the board and commission room, but today's meeting is being held virtually. We have one item on the meeting today, and that is a briefing by Seattle Department of Transportation staff in the Public Space Management Group talking about public benefits related street and alley vacations, skybridge and term permits. I know we're going to be joined by a few members of the public, and we've also going to be joined by at least one additional staff person today. Why don't we go ahead and do a round of introductions, and starting with commissioners, and then we'll have other people introduce themselves. Kevin, do you want to start us off, and then Phoebe?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin O'Neill. I am the Transportation Planning Commissioner and current chair of the commission.
Thanks. Phoebe?
I'm Phoebe Bogert, Landscape Architect Commissioner and Vice Chair.
Zubin and Brian?
Yeah, Zubin Rao, Architecture Commissioner.
Morning, Brian Markham, Engineering Commissioner.
Eric and Ray, and then Shireen.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Alipio, and I'm the Get Engaged Commissioner.
Good afternoon. I'm Ray Castle. I'm the Planning Commissioner.
Hi, all. I'm Shireen Masudi, At-Large Commissioner.
Sure. Sierra, Beverly and Amy and Sierra, could you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Beverly Barnett, and thank you, Michael, for noting that I'm going to be retiring, because I did want to be able to introduce as the new person that you'll be seeing for both vacations and term permits until they hire a new term permit person. So. And that would be me, Amy Gray. I work in SDOT and Public Space Management, and I'm excited and somewhat daunted to take over this role. So I think Kevin mentioned to me in a message that large shoes to fill, and boy, am I feeling it right now. So.
Thanks,
Hi,
Amy.
everyone. I'm Ciara. I'm part of the team with lovely Beverly and Amy, and I'll be just helping get through the presentation here today.
Thanks, Sierra. Dipti, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dipti, and I work for the Early Community Outreach Program with OPCD.
Thanks, Dipti. We have a number of people who joined us as well. Mark, can we start with you, and then Katie, Jesse, and then Paul?
Chair Mark Brands, Landscape Architect with Site Workshop, and sometimes presenter at Commission.
Sometimes. Katie?
Hi, Katie Kendall with McCullough Hill. I'm a land use attorney, and have been before a number of you on a few vacations recently and in the past.
Jessie Clausen, also a land use attorney at McCullough Hill. And Katie, you didn't introduce your dog, who will bark at the exact
That's Larry.
Larry. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Larry. And Holly, can you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, Holly Golden. I am another land use attorney over at Hillis Clark and have worked on a bunch of street and alley vacations and sky bridges. I look forward to chatting about public benefits.
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, just as a before Beverly and Amy start their presentation, we thought it was a good time to have a update, a reminder about not only the street and alley vacation process in general, but really the idea of what is a public benefit in the context of not only street and alley vacations, but sky bridges and term permits. We thought it was a good time to have a bit of a refresher, a reminder, and just before we will have a few vacations coming in the next couple of months, and last but not least, partly because of Beverly's retirement, we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to hear from her before she leaves us, before she retires. Amy or Sierra, are you ready to go to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll share my screen now.
Great, take it away.
Can you guys all see that?
Yes.
Hello? You see the PowerPoint? Oh, there you go.
There.
Yeah, there we go.
Wait for us for a minute.
Yeah.
So from this conference room, we can't see you guys when the PowerPoint is up. So you'll have to jump in or clap your hands or something. So you're all anonymous. We're just speaking to our own screen now. So I'm going to start, and I always write on my hand when we're at the Design Commission to start out by saying thank you to the commission. As I've said before, when we've been over there presenting and just talking through things, we really rely on the expertise of the Design Commission, and we know that other city agencies and certainly the City Council does as well. So I'm not sure that the Design Commission gets the appreciation publicly that they deserve, but I think you're really a very important part of the vacation process. And so we really appreciate having the opportunity to come before you and just engage and talk about vacations and sky bridges and term permits. So we didn't have too much time, so we pulled up a street vacation and term permit PowerPoint that we've done before. We are not going to go through all the procedural steps. We're going to try to stay higher level and talk about public benefit and how we define it and the more difficult task of how we measure it. And we're going to do compare and contrast between street vacations and term permits. So Amy and I, we think we're organized. We're kind of going back and forth. At least we're sitting by each other. So if I keep talking about something she's supposed to cover, if you hear pinching, it's from when we're reminding each other.
Oh.
So I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Beverly, what? Oh, we're there. It's quite loud. The protest got really loud.
It's really loud.
So it was a little distracting. What did you say?
Protest across at City Hall. The protest. Yeah, it was quite loud when we were there for an earlier meeting. So yeah, if we need to repeat or something, again, I'm sorry the setup is so weird because we can't see your faces to see if we're making sense or if you have a question. But we'll do the best we can. And as I said, we're going to go back and forth with PowerPoint. We included some of the process background so that this would be a usable for Michael and Wendy and Valerie, perhaps for other trainings or just as a reminder. But we don't want to focus on the procedural. We want to talk about, kind of the nature and distinction of the different things that we do. So if we can start going into the presentation outline. So this is what we're going to cover. And of course, the photo with this is at Lake Union Park, which did have vacations. And that's the lovely Mohi building. And that I think is a great shot. And then this is just what we're going to cover, not in too much detail because we want to kind of hear from commission members and members of the public or the bar, since except for Mark, I think they're all in the bar, of what they want us to focus on. What we want to get to is the examples of public benefit, but we did want to set the background. So this is what we're going to cover. And then the next this slide, we always incorporate this on vacations because I think this shows how powerful vacations are and how they impact the city. And so we always pop that in at the beginning or the end. And this is the most recent one we have. And so Ciara just looked at this for this January. I guess this isn't January anymore, but January 2026. So part of what we wanted to talk about is a little bit about what is right-of-way, what it's used for, and we're going to get to some of the purposes a little bit later. But I think that nature of the real property interest that is either vacated or is impacted by a long-term permit is really important, I think, when we're looking at impacts to the public and what the public should receive back from the actions that we take. So street right-of-way is any property that's set aside for streets or alleys. It's created through easement. Most streets in the city of Seattle, over 85%, are created by plat. So generally we're looking at plat maps. I think one important thing to note here is that there is no right to vacate right-of-way, and there's also no right to use right-of-way for private purposes. So both of the actions we'll be talking about today have an element of discretion. And so that gives the city more flexibility in saying, maybe that's not what we want to do. I think as everyone in this body knows, street vacations are solely the province of the Seattle City Council. That authority is given to them by the state, and the state has set some regulatory requirements like the petition process, who can petition, and the public hearing. But the substance of when the city council might grant a vacation is really more contained in the street vacation policies. And that's basically the document that we work with. And we'll get to that in a slide or two, but just in looking at what it is, it kind of, I think that's important. So the drawing on this slide is from the street improvement manual. And I think that lays out the street right of way, because people tend to think of it as just like the improved roadbed, and it's much more than that. Streets are always wider than just the improved roadbed. And another point with this is that street right-of-way is defined by its creation, not by its use. So unimproved right-of-way still remains as public right-of-way for forever. So a little background on that. So we can go to the next. We wanted to do this slide early in the presentation because as we're talking about public benefit today, we're talking about how do we elevate code obligations, and that applies to both at-grade term permits, impacts from sky bridges, and street vacations. So Michael was asking us, what do we look at? Where do you find criteria? Do you have criteria? And we think right-of-way enhancements are very well articulated in things like Streets Illustrated, which is the City of Seattle's right-of-way improvement manual. We have a good model in the street vacation policies. The city does street concept plans, and that's an example here of a public benefit element at City Light that I think turned out really well. I think, also common design principles. When we're at the design commission looking at the work that we bring before this body, we always learn something about how we measure and test out what really does work to serve the public. We look at community goals, and that's when we talk about community engagement. It is the hope that in all the work that we're doing, that we can bring in a sense of the neighborhood, the community, and its history, and what just are the community's goals when they see development in the area. And we also look at things like the levy and master plans. So there's tons of information about what we want to see in the street and how it serves the public. The blue side, what is that? The right side lists all the kinds of things that we look at and that we talk to the commission about and bring in. And when we're defining public benefit mitigation or public benefit, it's always beyond code. So these are the kinds of elements that we would look at in a bigger sense for street vacations and in a more compact sense for term permits and sky bridges. So then the street vacation policies are kind of a foundation document for us, and this lays out all the steps and that it's the city council province. And we can go to 7. So This is something I think that everyone is really familiar with, and this is kind of our overview of all the steps in the council process. I think when we look at the pre-submittal, that has really been very strongly enhanced since the adoption of the 2018 policies. And one of the important things is the requirement that there be a community engagement plan. And so everyone who comes in and is interested in a vacation goes through the pre-submittal steps early on. And doing the community engagement plan before the application is really intended to create an opportunity for the community to guide public benefit. And it's hearing very early on and looking at how the community goals and plans might elevate and inform the community engagement plan. And since this is at the Design Commission, your role's in red. So the Early Design Commission, and I think that's generally a subcommittee. We don't see as many projects going through EDG right now, but any of that early planning work needs to be done. And of course, they work with SDOT and with our development review group and looking at the vacation process. Then they come in and we start the real substantive work. And at the Design Commission plays a very significant role in looking at every aspect of the vacation. And I think that's all we wanted to cover on process, unless there's questions, since we're really trying to set the backdrop and then get into public benefit. So this we wanted to include. This is the first part of the vacation review, but I really like this slide because it outlines why we have streets, why we like them, why we want to keep them. This covers everything that streets and alleys provide for the public. And streets have a really very broad purpose. It's not just how you get into your garage from your alley. So this list is really important. So if we're looking at either an impactful permit or the loss of right-of-way through the vacation process, this is what the public is giving up. And so we look at what this public asset provides for the public and helping guide us to find what is appropriate for public benefit. And that's another alley vacation that you'll recognize on the side of the project. But this is the core purpose of streets. And so if we're losing that or impacting it, we look at replacing some of those core functions with public benefit or public amenities. So I think defining public benefit is much easier than measuring it. And so, we've looked at the reasons we have streets, which give us, the kinds of things we want to replace or mitigate, and what we know about from design and planning and SDOT's street concept plans and things, what we get out of streets. So key for us is always looking at something beyond code requirements. And we do want to incorporate equity principles when we look at public benefit. And we want to hear from the community, and it needs to be long-term. So there's lots of different categories. The City Council has had an interest recently in looking at off-site public benefit elements that could benefit underserved communities. And we haven't seen a lot of that yet, but that does remain an option, that if an on-site area is already looking great, and they might look at doing something off-site in a community that might not get a great plaza that's being developed related to a vacation. So all the categories are the kinds of things that a developer might bring into us and that we'd be bringing forward to the Design Commission. So, the last thing before we get to Amy, as I was saying, I think defining is easier than measuring, and the quality of whether something really does serve the public is something that we really look to the Design Commission to help us in interpreting that. I think if somebody comes in and says, oh, we've got this great rooftop deck and people can use it on Saturday mornings, we know that doesn't work, but how impactful some of the public benefit proposals are in enhancing the ability of the public to use and enjoy the area, I think is a very important role for the design commission. And I think when we look at the impacts to the public trust and the obligations of public benefit, that balance, I think is one of the most difficult and interesting things the commission discusses. And then I think Amy's going to do a quickie on, got my slides out of order, on significant structure term permits. And then we're going to look at examples and see what you all have to say.
Hello. So there's two types of permits. It's significant structure permits or Skybridge permits that will come to the design commission for a recommendation on the public benefit mitigation. Normally, predominantly, they will be Skybridges because Skybridges require the design commit, they require public benefit, and they require the design commission to review and provide a recommendation. Some significant structures, they're normally things like tunnels, pipelines, plazas, staircases. But there are some types of significant structure term permits that do go to the design commission and do have public benefit obligations. An example of that would be what you recently saw with the kiosks. And those, the only type of significant structure term permit that would come to the council and require or come to the commission and require public benefit are at-grade structures. And it's really dependent on the impact to the pedestrian realm. And so you'll see in this image on the right, that is a transformer. It's at grade, but it's pretty small and it didn't really have a significant impact on the pedestrian environment. And so it did not go to the council or the commission for your review. Next slide. So both significant structure term permits and Skybridges have the two-step process of council. There's the resolution for conceptual approval, and then there's the final ordinance. The design commission weighs in prior to us sending a resolution to city council. So we don't send anything to council for conceptual approval before the commission has looked at the project, evaluated, provide recommendations, given input. And so we take that information that you all provide us and combine it with the staff evaluation, and then that's when we send the resolution to city council. So Skybridge term permits. So they're different, they're unique, they're a separate section of the code, and it's the city's policy and council's direction in the code that says the city of Seattle wants to limit the proliferation of Skybridges throughout Seattle. So we, as a city policy and in the code, want to discourage Skybridges. They have an impact on the environment around. They take people off the street. They're visually impactful. And so we look at these very carefully to make sure that there's a compelling need and that any impacts of that structure are mitigated through public benefit. Sorry. So the technical review that the department does is we convene Skybridge Review Committee from various disciplines that looks at the technical aspects. Is it high enough? Does it have enough clearance? Is it structurally sound? Things like that. And we compile that basically as a staff report that we provide our director. This is another recent on the right, the Pike Place Market Skybridge came to the commission, and so it was a re-permitting. This was an existing Skybridge, so it had a new Skybridges require public benefit because it's a brand new impact on the environment. Existing Skybridges, when they reach their final expiration at 30 years, are reevaluated, but because they've been there for a long time, decades, there's less public benefit mitigation that would be expected. Slide. So we're going to turn into some examples now.
Yeah, now we're going to look at some examples, and we might have picked examples that some of you worked on. So everything should look familiar. And the one thing as we get into the examples where you see with the street vacation, we've got a handful of those, and then Amy's got a handful of hers, and then we just want to talk through things. But since a street vacation is a permanent decision and does really alter the grid, the scale of development, the public benefit is intended to last for a very long time. It is tended to be a permanent public benefit, whereas with Amy's permits, that's the city granting permission for a private encroachment for a limited period of time. And it seems really long, but in the life of a city, even 30 to 50 years is the blink of an eye. And so if there's a sky bridge and Amy has benches and landscaping beneath it, and the sky bridge goes away because the building is sold, that public benefit is more tied to the impacts of the sky bridge, whereas with the public benefit features associated with the permanent decision of a vacation really are intended to last forever. And we do have pretty good tools to make that happen. What the world is going to be like in 200 years, I don't know, but this plaza will probably still be there. So this is the 2&U project downtown, and I almost think the building design is a public benefit, but don't write that down because we didn't consider it that. I just really like this view, and and I think Michael will probably want to speak to this one too. But so we thought we would run through the examples, and then we'll go back and talk about whatever people want to talk about. We really want to hear what the commission and what our friends that are here think about what works and how we measure it and how we have a more powerful voice for the community. So this is 2&U downtown that has public spaces and art spaces and an overlook view now that the viaduct is gone of the waterfront, and it's spaces that you can walk around freely. It's on a hill, so one side has stairs, but it's just it's a cool space. And the next one, this is Seattle City Light, the Broad Street substation, and we included this because the street is cool. This is a street concept plan that perhaps someone in the room helped work on. But I think what we liked about this is that this the Broad Street substation got a very small amount of right-of-way to do essential upgrades for City Light at their existing facility. So the public benefit is more moderate in scale than the 2&U example, but I think this is really impactful. I think every street should look like this. Maybe not yellow, but every street should have this. So the next one of my favorites, the Lennar Ovation Alley Vacation. And this one created this really great public plaza. And I think what's so interesting about this is that everyone believes this belongs to Town Hall. I'm a Town Hall member. I'm up there at events all the time. There are always people there meeting friends, having coffee, talking. And I think if I surveyed them and said, who do you think owns this? They would say Town Hall. And I thought that is, I think, a really strong measure of how we create something that the public feels like, I'm going in there because I know I can. I can sit here because I know I can. And it's just a charming space. So, and then the Amazon spheres, the entirety of the street environment around Amazon's projects has a lot of interest. There is benches and things all over the place. This is such a cool photo. We had to include this, but this shows kind of what can be done with a willing developer, a creative design team, and a push from the design commission. So there's a lot of great spaces to walk around in that neighborhood. They're all very welcoming, even though, you know, I don't know anything about technology. I'm very comfortable walking around there looking like I'm the grandmother to the workers that are there, but it's still cool. So we really like that pedestrian environment there as well. So in this, the convention center art, so you see I've included all my favorite things in the public benefit discussion. The convention center, I think, has the best public art program ever. But they have interesting elements like this all the way around the site that just draw you in and draw your eye. And it's a very powerful art program. And you're so busy looking at the art that you kind of forget how big the building is next to you, because it's just very engaging at the street level. And this is kind of our segue slide. And this is what we're talking about. We know what public benefit elements are. We have a lot of information about streetscape enhancements and how to really create a cool and interesting pedestrian environment. So the Fred Hutch, those benches are from a Sky Bridge review, and the wood benches are from the Convention Center, their vacation review. And they have benches like this all around their site that are great. So you can kind of step out of the fray and sit down, and they're very interesting. But we thought this is kind of the overlap between things that serve the public. Sky Bridge did not do as much as the Convention Center because of the scale of the impact and the permanency of the decision. And now Amy's got a couple of things she pulled out that we're going to run through, and then we'll see what you think.
So the first example I wanted to discuss or talk about is the UW Skybridge network. There were 5 skybridges that sort of surrounded the campus, crossing Montlake, Northeast Pacific, and 15th. Some were expired permits and some had never actually been permitted. So we decided we'd like to bring them all under one permit to make it ease administratively. And so their public benefit was basically the Burt Gilman Trail upgrades that happened maybe a decade ago. If you all remember walking or riding on the Burt Gilman early days, it was kind of a circus around the campus. People walking right in front of you, bikes whizzing by, and so they did the separation. They made better connections. They improved the surface in a lot of areas, and so that Burt Gilman really beats public. Everyone feels like they belong there, but it was the public benefit for the 5 sky bridges. So there was, Bevo, you talked about this in sort of the segue slide. So the Fred Hutch Sky Bridge was a brand new sky bridge that was constructed, and its public benefit mitigation package include the staircase that takes you from Eastlake down to Fairview. There's signage, wayfinding signage. There's this on the Eastlake side, the slide to the right. They opened up the sidewalk area and made these little pull-out mini plazas with benches and enhanced landscaping. So because this was a new sky bridge that was going to have an impact, a new impact, its public benefit mitigation was more robust than what you would see, I think on the next slide. Yes. So the Westin Hotel. Some of you know the history of how we struggled to come up with a public benefit proposal over the years. Then COVID happened, and then SDOT would do projects. It was a trial. We got it, and City Council passed the new permit in January. So what they did for their public benefit, because it was an existing sky bridge, again, not requiring such an extensive mitigation element, is what's commonly known as the Macy's tree, the giant sequoia, and the traffic island. The image on the far left shows it was relocated from somewhere around the Aurora in 1973. The middle image shows that it was in pretty poor health and it was suffering. It had restricting lights on its trunk that were restricting its growth. The man in the tree incident where he damaged the top of the tree. Poor irrigation. The roots were it was getting heavily watered, but the tree was dehydrated because of the way it was being irrigated, and it just needed a lot of help. And so the Westin Hotel, their public benefit was to come in, work with SDOT Urban Forestry, and do maintenance and sort of revive the tree and see if we could help it out. And the image on the right is what was taken recently. It's still parts of it are kind of sad looking, but we're hoping that this will help. Actually, Urban Forestry said that the work that the Westin Hotel did on this tree has significantly lengthened its lifespan and given it a chance to thrive. If it hadn't been done, the tree was likely to have died in like the next 5 years. So this iconic tree was able to be saved through a public benefit. And I think that's the end.
Yeah, I think that's it. So we really wanted to kind of get questions and hear from you what you think works really well. How do we define public benefit? How do we elevate the community voice? And basically anything you want to talk about.
Thanks, Beverly. Before we do have a number of people from the public attending, and if they have any questions before you all launch into your own questions and comments as well. Kevin, I did want to just have a brief opportunity for Dipti Garg to say anything. Dipti introduced herself in the beginning of the meeting. She recently moved to OPCD from the Department of Neighborhoods, and her job continues to be helping helping applicants both create and oversee the community engagement programs that you all expect to be continuously implemented through the projects that you review. So, Dipti, did you have any comments or anything that you wanted to say before we switch over to public comment and then questions?
Sure, I can give a quick overview on the program. As Michael mentioned, I only recently started with the Early Community Outreach Design Review Program at OPCD. The program was earlier housed at DON, and now it's transitioned to OPCD. And in the process, we are updating all our documentation, website, Acela platform. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of the program, I can give a quick overview. The Early Outreach for Streetification program, it provides an opportunity for surrounding neighborhoods and communities to be involved, and they can provide feedback very early in the process of the project. And the graphic that Beverly showed earlier, it's in the application process, it's that first block, which is the pre-application process, where we review, where we work with the applicant and the developer to formulate a community engagement plan. And in this plan, the applicant sort of outlines ways in which they will engage with the community and to identify priorities and the public benefit options. And the outreach methods, they can include, they do include public printed media, online resources, and in-person activities like open houses and meeting with community groups. And all these outreach methods have to be followed and are sort of consistent with the director's rule that is again being updated to reflect the change from DON to OPCD. And once this plan is approved by us, then the applicant, they go and implement these early community engagement activities. And once they are completed, they provide documentation for us to review and to approve the program. And one of the recent examples of a streetification process that we are in the process of reviewing is the South Park Water Quality Facility project. SPU is pursuing a streetification for South Chicago Street. and to maximize community space. Right now, the street sort of intersects the site and divides it into two. And with the street vacation process, they're trying to really maximize that community space. And one of the highlights, what they did in this outreach method as part of that early engagement, the project team, they conducted 8 youth workshops with the Duwamish Valley Youth Corps and the Duwamish Valley Sustainability Association. And these workshops, they focused on these young people co-designing the surplus land, which is outside of the facility footprint. And it was very encouraging to see such a robust outreach process, and also the outcome and the suggestions made by these young people. So I thought it was a very interesting process for the street vacation program. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dipti. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you in the future. Kevin, or people attend, before we have commissioner questions or any comments, was there any members of our esteemed public here today that wanted to say anything or had any comments or questions before we dive into commissioners? And that's, we'll try to keep that time available for you later on. I do appreciate all of you attending today. We wanted to just have this conversation with Beverly before her retirement. A lot of the work that we do and a lot of the reason that the work is successful is a lot of the people on this call. And I really appreciate you taking the time today. Jesse, Katie, Mark, Jack McCullough joined us. Holly, again, thank you for spending some of your afternoon with us.
Michael, I did want to say one thing about based on, and even just on the heels of what Dipti was talking about engagement. And this rises out of the 2018 policy updates when Michael Bryan was, ran the street LA vacation, the committee, and came up with some ideas. And one of the things that was really helpful was to expand the list off from on-site to off-site based on, in this, where you find it with the community, with the engagement with the community. That's super helpful because your block or wherever you are doesn't always, your street frontage doesn't always offer up the opportunities, and the neighborhood has higher priorities often. And to be able to go off-site and pursue benefits really expands it and bases it within the community. They end up advocating for these benefits, which is super helpful for everybody, and really feeling like we're pursuing the right benefits that benefit the community. So I just wanted to offer that up, that was a very significant thing that was offered up, and we've leveraged it on a number of projects.
Thanks, Mark. You're spot on. I appreciate you bringing that up. Jesse?
Yeah, and just to add to that, I had the pleasure of working on the Weston Sky Bridge, the saga, with Amy and Beverly, and a couple of, observations on that. Sometimes the duration of a project, what is a public benefit 12 years ago in folks' eyes versus what's a public benefit today can really change, right? So, that was a big change on that project. And then I think for the ownership side, but then also from the, commission and SDOT side, being really open to different types of ideas like that offsite, situation that just kind of happened upon us from SDOT Forestry. So it was brought to us by SDOT. Hey, what about if we did this? And we said, that's a great idea. We'd love to do that. And I actually think that is a very true public benefit. The public, big P, enjoys that tree. And, it's not just something that's beneficial, just to the Weston on their frontage or something like that, but it is actually for the public. So we, appreciated the work with SDOT on that. But it can, public benefits can be lots of different things.
Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate the context. I've forgotten that was occurred as well. So it's amazing what a little effort can do for something that's so iconic in downtown. before we throw it to commissioners, any other kind of questions or comments from our attendees?
I'm happy to jump in. I would say one challenge with the public benefits process is just sort of the inherent subjectivity. I think that we saw these, comparisons and, what feels cool enough when you're talking about a public benefits. And that is going to be experienced differently by every single individual and every single reviewer. And so in my mind, that's sort of the underlying challenge around an evaluation of public benefits. And so as we're working with applicants approaching, a vacation process, a Skybridge process, a term permit process, that's a tough conversation because there's a lot of uncertainty and lack of predictability, lack of clarity around time and cost as you start embarking on the process. And so I think as we wrestle with what it means to do a public benefits evaluation and what that should look like going forward, I'd urge you just to have that in the back of your minds. And there's no easy answer there, but I think that it's really important to wrestle with it. And to the extent that there can be clear guidance, that would be greatly appreciated. The other last thing that I'll throw out there, and I know that this is really different than the way that public benefits have been, thought about in the past, but Beverly sort of joked about the 2NU building itself being a public benefit. And I think when you look around, especially in the climate right now, where projects are just having a really hard time getting going, rethinking what it means to allow a project to seek a vacation or get a term permit, if that tool can be used to get more housing built, that is a huge benefit to the city. Those are homes for people to live in. It's a bump to the tax base. Like, it's a great thing. And so rather than having a mindset that like, what are we getting out of this project? I think just a reframing at times of like what this project is doing for the city just inherently. So those are the things I'd layer on.
Thanks, Holly. Kevin, do you want to kick off the questions? I think so Commissioners, we thought we'll start with some questions and then maybe after we've done that, if there are any comments that you want to make. And I see Brian raised his hand. Brian, do you want to kick us off with questions?
Thank you for all this. I think one of the things that we've struggled with along the way, and we've used this term a couple times so far in bringing it up, but defining what public is, right? Like, we all say public benefits, but who are the public? How far does the public go? Specifically, does the people who are paying for the improvement also, are they included in that same definition of public? I think I'd love to hear about that a little bit. Beverly, I think probably starting from you and then going around the same thing.
Yeah, I think we consider everyone to be a member of the public, but when we're looking at obligations that a developer has, we do look at the general public as being different from the particular public that might live there. If you live in an apartment building that's getting a street vacation, of course you're a member of the public, and if there's a cool plaza up front, you're going to use it and enjoy it. But the idea is that the larger public, the general public, is impacted by the change in the street grid. And we do want to make sure that when we're creating spaces that they are welcoming to the general public and not just serving the needs of the developer. I think we've all seen plaza spaces that haven't been very successful because you feel like you've got to have an entry card to get in, or you're not dressed right or something. So we're really looking at things that are accessible, available, and welcoming to just anybody. You don't have to live in Laurelhurst to walk down the street in Laurelhurst. And we want to create the spaces that we're providing need to serve everyone. And if you live there, it's great, it benefits you too, but you don't make all those decisions. It's about the really broad public.
Thank
you.
you.
Sorry, Shireen. Were we going Shireen then Kevin?
Did anyone else wanted to talk about what Brian just asked? Because I think it's been a big question that we've been all wondering. So I just wanted to leave space if Dipti or anybody else wanted to talk about just the definition of public before we jump to like my question.
So for early community outreach, generally, when we target the surrounding community and the surrounding neighborhood, and generally we target, like in case of like when we have to send out outreach, we target at least 500 feet from whatever that site identified. So we do look at the immediate neighbor for the project, just in terms of the early community outreach process part of it.
Michael?
Yeah.
Mike, can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
So just to add on to what Beverly's saying about the public is obviously the people who live around there and interact or work there and everything, but it's also people visiting and coming from, Tacoma or Linwood or coming into town. People can be in streets in Seattle and you don't have to live here. You don't have to have immigration status. You don't it's really everybody. And so the concept of the public is global, and in that streets serve the public, all of the public, whether you're driving a car, walking a dog or things like that. We think about that as the in the global sense is everyone who uses the street. If you work here or whatever, it's not just sort of the public around the development.
Thanks, Amy. Sure. Shireen, back to you.
My question for I think both Beverly and Dipti is one thing that I've personally been struggling with a little bit throughout the last year is what level of community engagement should we expect at the pre-petition stage when projects come to us? I feel like we've seen everything from no community engagement to some very thorough, just like the South Park project that you just mentioned, Dipti, that have done like tons of work in that. And when it comes to public benefit, I think going back to what Holly was mentioning, as much as feedback we can have from the community, I think that would be really helpful for us to be able to determine the public benefit that's being provided, is that fitting really what the actual community needs or not. So like stepping back to pre-petition specifically stage when projects come to us, what level of community engagement should we expect from the projects at that point for it to, make sense and also set expectations?
Okay, well, the pre-petition activity includes several steps, and they're not necessarily linear, but the obligation is that a developer would draft a community engagement plan that then has to be supported by OPCD, and that they would begin their early work, and then there's obligations that last through the review and development of the proposal. So it's all a part of that early work. And I think it's probably always going to differ a little bit, that it's going to be more conceptual. I think when we get into it, what we all should be looking at, and the Design Commission always asks about this, what did you hear from the community, and show us on your project how you incorporated that. Or if it isn't feasible because of the zoning or something, how are you addressing what the community asked for? I think that's something that kind of lasts through. But yeah, when the pre-petition work can vary just depending on how far they have gone in implementing the plan.
And the only thing I would interject too is that, you all have seen projects, and everyone in this room, in this meeting, has seen projects where that's clear and measurable. You're doing a vacation in a particular neighborhood where you have a very clear population. You've got a very clear constituency that you can reach out to. We've all seen projects, though, in the industrial zones. One in particular that was creating a public benefit from land that was owned by City Light. adjacent to the Georgetown neighborhood where that constituency was very opaque. One of the things that Mark had done that Beverly had highlighted earlier for City Light, for that transformer, that was a very tough public benefit or community engagement proposal in a way, because while it is a very urban neighborhood, it doesn't necessarily have a specific group of people to draw upon who would have been particularly invested in the outcome. I think that's the challenge, Shireen, with some of the projects that we see that require this process that don't necessarily benefit from a very clear population-based constituency or a neighborhood that we would traditionally think about. Kevin, I think we have Kevin, then Ray, then Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So just first of all, just from a procedural standpoint, we're going until 3. So I'd like to reserve time, have enough time for commission questions, but also have time for commission comments too, back to SDOT staff. So just Michael, if you can kind of help with timekeeping there, that'd be great. My question, and Holly's comment sort of anticipated my question. So I've just, as I think a lot of people know, I've worked on a lot of these projects, both at SDOT and now as a member of the Design Commission. And on street and alley vacations, on the public trust, there are very clear criteria that we follow. On term permits, there's very clear criteria that we follow. But then on public benefit, it is, frankly, it's somewhat subjective, right? And that's part of what the commission works on together with SDOT staff. Is sort of, it's almost like, to me, it's almost like a little bit of a sniff test, right? Does this public benefit package seem reasonable for this project, given where it is, what's going on, et cetera? And Beverly, I was struck by your quote that I think you said public benefits are easier to identify than to measure. So that being the case, can you talk a little bit more about your process that you go through as staff to help? Because it's always helpful for us as commissioners to hear from you to say, yes, we think this public benefit package is reasonable, but that's based on something. So can you talk a little bit more about that process?
Yeah, I think, the starting point is the policies. So the policies kind of set out an old-fashioned balancing test that we look at. What is the public giving up? What does the developer achieve? And so that helps us say, oh, if this is a 400-foot office tower that cannot happen without the vacation, and they could not do their parking and services below grade, and it's the first building at scale in the neighborhood, we would see that's more impactful, and we would want to see a greater level of public benefit. The elements might be the same, but we might say, oh, you need to widen the sidewalk a little bit more, or your plaza needs to be bigger, or you need to enhance your art program or something. But we do look at what the public is giving up and what the developer achieves as a key point. And I think as can't remember, maybe Michael referenced earlier, but the policies do talk about things like public projects and affordable housing as, of course, including an element of public benefit. And so we would look at that as saying there's still physical impacts from the change to the grid and the increase in scale, but recognizing the public purpose of the project, we're going to kind of tone down the public benefit expectations, but it all goes into that balancing test. And I think with us, since the city council has been doing vacations under similar policies for decades, we have a lot of experience in what the city council has supported before. So we do look to that as well. But I think there is, what Holly was talking about, there being some subjectivity. And I think that's probably always inherent unless we looked at a formula, which I don't know that anyone wants to do, and said, oh, if your building costs X, your public benefit has to cost Y, or if you increase the FAR by X, your public space has to be Y. I think some of those are too constraining, but I think that is a good point about our looking at being as specific as we can, but not losing the element of, the surprise input, like, and this was a sky bridge, not an alley vacation, but the tree, who would have thought of that? So we want openings for that. So yeah, we measure, we balance.
Ray, you had a question? You're on mute. Let me unmute you. Oh. Ooh, sorry. How about now? You're still on mute. It's not, we're not, hopefully not, you don't think we're conspiring against you to talk, right? Why don't we, Ray, do you mind going out and then coming back in? Can you hear me? We wanted to make sure that we have enough time for all commissioners to ask any questions before we move on to comments. Commissioners, Ray, can you try it again? No. Are there any other commissioners that have questions? I wanted to give an opportunity for Mark, and thank you, Mr. McCullough, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Mark, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, I had both. I had a comment on the public engagement, and I think maybe, Brian, it gets at part of what you're talking about, and thinking about a certain sky bridge where we have a pretty big audience within, a couple of towers, and there are hundreds of people that populate a street, but they're also part of the applicant team. Are they public or are they not? That's one example. Another one would be Amazon. Say they decide to purchase another block and do an alley vacation. Are those 10 to 20,000 people that come from all over in a very diverse group, are they part of the public or not? That's something I think that and that's not to say that there are all sorts of other public engagement that are going on that is very meaningful, but that's, I think, a conversation we recently had, Amy, right on the Transforming Age Sky Bridge. That's just, I don't think we need to debate it here, but that's part of that discussion. Is the applicant, anybody associated with the applicant, are they part of the public? And is that fair to say that they can comment and contribute to ideas? I have a question for Beverly and Amy, and this really is about costs. We are asked to provide costs of the benefits. We do. Nobody checks them. The validity and reliability is questionable. I know it originated with when Mike O'Brien was part of council and wanted some kind of metric to start to track. It's become something that we have to do. And I don't know how much utility there is in this and how it's being tracked. And I just want to hear from you, like, is that still useful in your mind? And how much is it discussed in council, or is it just something that we tick?
Well, I think it's a little bit in between. I think, and it was like, as we were talking about the subjectivity of public benefit, adding a price to an element helps us see if this is very significant. If someone came in and said, oh, I've got one park bench, that's kind of an obvious, probably not enough for almost anything, but it helps us weigh and balance, especially if we look at if this is a $300 million development project, what looks like an appropriate level of giving something meaningful, but not too much. I think now, once we start doing something that we present to council for a while, it's pretty hard to step back. And I think it is their expectation that it helps them to get them a sense of this is enough. So when we're in saying this is a good public benefit proposal, and the design commission supported it, we recommend it, seeing the breakdown of the different elements. If we say you're doing this street concept plan, and if you talk about then a setback, non-standard pavers, additional landscaping, all the kinds of things that you might do, wayfinding art. We see the individual elements and their cost. It looks like, yeah, that's a big step to provide those enhancements for public benefit. So I think there is utility in it. In terms of checking the numbers, we do rely on the integrity of the packages that are brought into us, and we don't really have a means to check that. But I think, we do see similar kinds of packages and elements, and it's the kind of work that's done within SDOT. So if it was too out of line, we might have questions. But yeah, we always work with what we're provided, and we always get pretty good information.
I wanted to go to Ray's question. He had a really, I think, a question that we all struggle with sometimes, which is and I'll just read the question, what is the rational nexus for offsite setting of benefits? How far or where can it be? Ray, when we've been talking about, and then the SharePoint site, I included the 2018 council policies. Beverly, I'd throw it to you for you to respond to that. I think it is a qualitative challenge.
Yeah, and I think with Nexus, when we're looking at street and alley vacations, there's a range of public benefits that can be provided. And we look at, a change in the street grid or, the loss of an alley. We do consider that those have a broader impact because it's part of essentially a citywide system. So we're looking at offsets to that, and we do generally with vacations see most things on site or adjacent, like maybe somebody is proposing a bike connection to a light rail station from their building. So we see kind of that, old school nexus, because the public benefit / mitigation is close to where the impacts are. But the council has moved to expand that because generally we see the developments that we work on in really well built out urban neighborhoods. And so it's an opportunity to provide something in an underserved community. And that is something that a developer can select. It's not mandatory, but we still see most things on site. We are finding now more often if they've got a good package that they might offer, planning for a neighborhood park. We've had that in West Seattle. But yeah, we do always started with on-site and we move out from there. And the council has been supportive of off-site when it is a part of a neighborhood or community plan, or can be an enhancement in an underserved community.
And I'd like to say for Skybridges, the Nexus, because it's a mitigation to the impact of the Skybridge, like I said, we encourage people to look first on their property or close to it, and then move out. But because the medication is for the specific impact on that Skybridge, we want it to be close. So we don't normally look at public benefits for, like, say, a community plan someplace else or on a different. So
we have about 20 minutes left before we go to commissioner comments. Jeff, do you have anything to further the conversation for us?
I promise not to exhaust the available time. First of all, I was joking, Michael, with you and Beverly the other day. My first vacation was in front of the Board of Public Works in the 1980s. But had, really a great run with the Design Commission for decades. I was first of all, I want to say hi to Ray. Ray, I haven't seen you in quite a while. I'm still here. Glad to see you are too. Yeah, welcome back to the fray. Just two perspectives really quickly. One is, what do I tell people when we're thinking about a vacation? I always, on the applicant side, for you commissioners, I focus on the no vacation alternative. I mean, to understand what public benefit is, we need to be able to come in and show you pictures and say, here's, realistically what would happen without a vacation, and here's what could happen with a vacation. And you have to be able to look at those two pictures as commissioners. And when we present them to you and say, that makes sense, right? So that's always personally my internal test as to whether to bring anything to you. And if it doesn't make sense, we don't bring it to you, right? So on your side, what I would say is you should be open to that. And I think the commission has been. There have been moments in history when the commission has gotten, Kevin, to your point, maybe excessively academic about trying to, dive into the minutia of how do you calculate things. But if it's, if it's good for the neighborhood, if it's good for the block, if it's good for the city, if you're leaving the site and the area better than you found it, then, that's a public benefit to me. And we go through the exercise, Beverly, of documenting and Mark, all the costs and everything like that. And it's important. But at the end of the day, I think you have to look at it and say, yeah, we'd rather do this than that. So I encourage you as a commission to continue ultimately to take that view, because you have, and it's been, I think, really successful for the city. We've done your examples, Beverly. There's some great stuff we've done in the last couple decades.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Kevin, do you want to kick us off on comments or follow-up, or however you want to slice that?
If it's okay. If it's okay, I'll just launch a comment, and then
please.
Eager to see what other commissioners want to add to this. And I think, my comment really pertains partly to what Jack was just talking about in our earlier discussion. And some of you have heard this before, because I think we bring it up at most commission meetings when we get into public benefit. But what's always really helpful, Beverly, is when, and to Mark and others who are bringing things to us, what's really helpful is when we get as clear a picture as possible about what is a public benefit over and above the other requirements, right? So like on the convention center, for example, and Beverly, you remember this, when we met as staff, we tried to lay out, okay, here's what the code requires, right? Now here's what SEPA mitigation is happening on top of that. Because remember, everybody needs to understand that any project that goes through SEPA can also have additional mitigation attached to it. And then the public benefit is over and above both of those things, right? So when we see a streetscape showing us, here's what the code requires, here's what we're doing in addition to that, is super helpful. Just to Jack's point, we can see it in black and white, right? Same with an open space addition. Here's what the code would have required, here's what we're doing. That, and I think that helps all of us in making that assessment, that yes, this seems reasonable. So that's, I guess, my comment to everybody, is just be as clear as possible at showing us that. And I think that really helps the council out too, ultimately, when they're making their final decision. So that's my main comment about this and about the public benefit particularly. Are there other commissioners that would like to add comments? Sharon, you've got your hand up. It looks like.
I can go next, Kevin. We recently, as of a couple of weeks ago, had a subcommittee on this. And I think one of the reasons we're having this meeting was to have some clarity on that process. And one of the things that we came up with is that we don't want to judge a public benefit package based on our artistic taste, or what thing, again, as Holly mentioned, is cool or hip or in, because those things also tend to expire. But the earliest that a team can put together a good public engagement package, and I'm so glad, Deputy, we have you, and if we can work more hand in hand with Department of Neighborhood and OPCD to have good examples for the teams to be able to look into that, because challenges sometimes, not often, but we see engagement processes that were maybe a little bit late. So for us to be able to look at the quality of that, the equity of that, and the timing of that, and to be able to have a better idea of what public project for a specific public benefit for a specific project can look like would be really helpful. And I'm personally hoping that moving forward, we can have a more hand-in-hand kind of relationship with Department of Neighborhood and OPCD, and pretty on being able to even showing some good examples that the team shared today with the applicants for them to know how to engage, who to engage. It seems like we'll all agree on the fact that the public that kind of participate need to be diverse, and they need to be more than just from the applicant side or the people that directly use that site or a plaza or whatever the site is that we're talking about. So I think just having that in mind and that clarity moving forward, added to everything that Kevin said about having clarity on what's above and beyond code, will be really helpful for our review.
Thanks, Shereen. Brian, did you have your hand up earlier? Thought I saw your hand up earlier.
I
Brian.
did, but then Shereen covered my part, so I took
Okay.
it down. Thank you.
Okay. Zubin?
Yeah, I think, maybe to add a little bit to Jack's sentiment, I mean, I think, I find it very helpful as a commissioner to try to narrowly focus on sort of the impact that is being created by the vacation, right? So like in my mind, a $300 million project doesn't owe the public twice as much as a $150 million project. They both owe kind of replacing what's lost in the neighborhood by the alley or the street. At least that's sort of my way of thinking about it. And I think that helps to kind of frame our thinking about what are the unique aspects of the project, what's it doing to the neighborhood. It's not just about how big it is or how expensive it is or how much economic benefit there is for the applicant, right? It's focusing really kind of narrowly in a way on what is being changed about the neighborhood physically and for people using the neighborhood. And I think that helps that sort of inform the right way of thinking about what's the public benefit that then needs to be provided, right? So I agree, like I don't think the sort of numerical calculation is super helpful, but I think thinking carefully and precisely about what the proposal is doing physically to the neighborhood is where we can be the most helpful or bring the most value. So I don't know if that way of thinking is like supported by code and policy, but that's sort of the way I think about it.
Thanks, Zubin. I appreciate that. Phoebe or Eric, did you have any?
Yeah, I'll just kind of jump in on top of that. I was actually thinking, and I think I said that at a recent subcommittee, kind of twofold conversation here. One, very much what you just said, Jack, is and Kevin about looking about. I think that is actually the quantitative analysis. So it's not about numbers, but really what it would be without the vacation and what is the offer with, right? So those are things where we can actually start to have, pull the qualitative out of it and say, okay, these are the real things. And then also allows us that, and I do remember saying that, kind of actually echoing Kevin at a recent subcommittee, is as understanding like, well, what is really happening here and what is going above and beyond, because I think that there is some conflation sometimes. So I think for all of us, and there's like a little bit of a flexibility with terms when we say, oh, well, this is a benefit to the public. Well, is that public benefit, or is that thing that you were going to do that was code required open space? Are you mixing those two? So I think it is really our incumbent upon us to really understand what is above and beyond, because most of the time, a lot of these, and when you were saying this, Zubin, a lot of the times, most of these right-of-ways are not being used, right? And so I think it is an easy thing for people or applicants to say, and for us all to say, well, why, this is obviously a better use because that wasn't used anyway. And I think it's the right of the city and it's the right of, us like upholding the public trust to be able to say, well, it could be a better space. And this is the right of the public to have this right of way. So really that's, the global public benefit is the deserved or the global public is what deserves better in this realm, right? And that you know, there is a level of subjectivity to this that, you know, has to be proved that it is public. Yeah, it's been really an interesting process, right? And I think we all kind of, it feels like a team effort amongst everybody that's actually on the screen too, right? That we're all kind of hoping for the best and, you know, kind of holding hands to not be obstructive in the process, but helpful so that it moves forward in good ways.
Thanks, Phoebe. Eric, did you have any comment?
Yeah, I think I'm very new to this world still, so I'm still trying to piece together a lot of my thoughts. But I think I've spent time around 2&U as well as the kind of Transformer project near the Seattle Center, and I think the subjectivity of all this, it really strikes me, especially defining the public, because 2&U, I've been around, it still feels kind of private in that area, like maybe not as welcoming as other parks, or maybe that's not the right phrasing. And then when I think of the kind of Transformer project near Seattle Center, I've walked around that road, and it is really cool to see the street furniture kind of populating these streets, but haven't seen too many people actually use the furniture. And so when we're determining public benefit, like how, yeah, I guess it comes back to that quantifying of like that benefit. If, you know, these street furniture, the benches aren't being used, is that, yeah, apologies again. That's kind of all over the place, but just some thoughts.
Eric, it's not all over the place. I'll just add, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no,
that is a real issue. I mean, if the public benefits aren't understood by the public to be public benefits, that's a problem, right? I mean, it's something we wrestle with. I think members of the design community to wrestle with that. So I think it's a really important point. So thanks for bringing that up. And yeah, I'm sorry if you had another.
You know, the other thing I was going to say, you know, we've been, you know, a number of people in this call, we've worked together for a number of years, and I think about what's been successful before the commission, and I don't think it's a dollar exercise. It's a purely design question, but I also think it's a question that gets answered very well when we see projects that have this very clear palpable gesture. And I'm thinking about a project that Jack worked on for Trailside. The building got pushed aside, a fundamental, I think it's an 18-foot wide link between Burt Gilman and the sidewalk that then connected to over to University Village. A fundamental design move that wasn't particularly complex in itself. It had a price, clearly, but it created this clear, palpable thing that didn't exist beforehand. That all you have to do is go out and realize, oh, well, that was a success. Those clear moves where it feels like the site is being moved to the side to allow the public to participate. Many of the things in our downtown, not only Amazon, but even some early projects along Second that may or may not have been a subject to a vacation. Washington Mutual Tower, Wells Fargo Tower, you're pushing the development away, creating this palpable open space that the public doesn't have to be monitored to get into. There isn't a test to get in. There's not a gateway to get in. They can just simply access it. That's where I've seen designers, clients, and the commission embrace those outcomes, where it feels like that thing exists without a lot of effort to get into it, provides something that you didn't know that you needed, but you sure really enjoy when you have it. And that's a difficult body of work to come up with, but that's where I've seen successes, at least from my perspective. For what
Michael, can I jump on that? Because go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
No, one other great example is just one we finished, Beverly, which was Westlake, right? The GID Parks vacation, right? And this is a true story. When GID out of Boston came and said, we're going to develop this site, I told them, you know, you are not going to develop a project that has another loading dock now next to a future park that is going to be facing onto Westlake. That is not going to happen, right? So we're going to go vacate this alley. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, no, we're going to vacate it. It's all going to be fine, because what we're going to take to the commission is something that they're going to go, shoot, this is a great result, right? And so everything that you guys can do to sort of help promote that with the, you know, applicant team, maybe more outreach, you know, and everything. But there's one other comment I would make. There is an opportunity now for catalyst projects. We are at a difficult time in the center city. And so I'm just warning, if I bring you a vacation that you otherwise might look at and say, I'm not sure about that, you know, I don't know if I will or not, but it, you know, a public benefit would be taking a center city that is having real challenges and making a transformational change in time and place. So I'll shut up.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Jack. We're about ready to close out. Before we close, Mark, and then any other commissioner comments or questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take on to Jack. I mean, when I talk to our clients, and oftentimes it's on the heels of a call from Jackson, I got one for you. It's really, it's coaching the client on mindset.
Right.
We're doing this, and it's a serious process. It's a public process, and you may not like it, but get used to it, because we're going to come up with some great ideas, and it can either be rough and rocky, or it can be something that is enjoyable and the project benefits from. And that's typically where we are. We typically have, we coach them in a good mindset. And I would, again, on the commissioner side, be open. The engagement should start, I think, around merit exercise. And that's where we're comparing alley, vacation, no vacation. We should be sharing that with the public to help them understand why it's better. But that mindset is so important. And I think for the most part, somebody said this, it's all of us producing these benefits. I don't care where the idea comes from, but we know when it's there. We know when we've got onto something that's qualitative and not so quantitative. And I think that's something that we then embrace as a group and shepherd it through with conditions and comments and things that we do. But that mindset is oh so important, and it makes our job enjoyable. Makes going to commission and listening to 10 people or wherever they are that are designers and really volunteering their time and thinking about our project. I think about how lucky we are to have that. That strengthens what we're doing all the way up to city council, and then we get to tell city council about it, and that makes us all feel good about, especially now, Jack, to your point, when the CBD is on its knees right now, and we need to think of creatively about how to.
I don't know.
And think about it take the long view to it as well. This isn't a short-term thing. This is looking way off into the future. Beverly said 200 years, so let's just say 200 years. But anyway, so I really appreciate that when I go in and we all have a mindset that we're going to make this project better and that we're all open to it.
And we appreciate the work you guys do. I mean, I tell my clients that you guys do great work, right? And our job is to bring you great projects. So.
Excellent.
And thank you, Beverly, for your service. Nobody said that, but we're going to miss you.
You will be missed for sure, Beverly.
Not as
Yeah,
much as
so
me
just
for me.
with a
I'm
minute
gonna miss
left,
her the
Beverly,
most.
any parting thoughts for us while you're still here?
No, I think this was a really a good conversation. I really appreciate all the comments, and I like all the comments about all of us working together on this, because I think we do have really good guidance from the street vacation policies, but we have to apply those to a fact pattern that every project that comes in the door. And so I think all of us at the interpretation and, our job trying to push the envelope for the benefit of the public, but not, push, Jack over a cliff where he doesn't do the project. So we got to find the balance. We really rely on the design commission, as I starting, and we know that the city council does too. So I think your work is really critical on well, everything about vacations, but the public benefit discussion, I think in particular for all of the work we do, vacations and the permit process.
Thanks, Beverly. And we will salute you at another time. Okay.
We have to have a party.
Thanks, yeah. Oh, well, that's it. We'll make sure that that's
Okay, good.
handled, if you will. Thanks everybody for attending today. Appreciate you coming on virtually. I think it was a good conversation, and we probably are due for a field trip to go look at some of these places to better educate ourselves. So, okay. Thank you, everybody. Kevin and Phoebe, can you hang on?
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for
Thank
everybody for
you.
including
Thank
us.
you all.
Cheers. Cheers.
Have a